They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. This is the Benchwarmerz podcast. I'm Lou Ruggieri, that's Jose Ortiz, and this is hour two, show two, whatever you want to call it. Talked about some interesting things you can go find in the first hour. Some Lance Armstrong. We talked a little George Floyd protests, and we touched on the AFC South, our rankings. Those will be up on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts. We are part of the iHeartRadio podcasting lineup, and we're very proud to be that. The Benchwarmers podcast at yahoo.com. Benchwarmers with a Z. Let us know how we're doing. This is the second hour of the show, and a little bit later on, we'll go back to football and touch on the NFC South. But first, Jose, thankfully, in this COVID era of apocalyptic nothingness, we are finally getting some light on the horizon, and the NBA is actually going to come back. The end of July, I think July 31st, there's a 22-team play-in game, and I'm curious your thoughts, but I want to ask you something right off the bat that was kind of bothering me, and it seems like the NBA is going to be sticking with the traditional East and West conferences. And I feel like they may have missed the mark with having a chance at something really, really memorable. And in a season where, I mean, the entire year in every facet of life is getting an asterisk. I think that having a chance to play in sort of a novel way and try something completely different would have been more memorable than anything imaginable. So imagine if we were able to have a Lakers-Clippers, Lakers-Rockets finals. I mean, I think that would have been unbelievable. You would have remembered that for the rest of your life. And I think that they I feel like they missed a chance at doing something really special.
Yeah, I kind of disagree. I was not in favor of mixing up the leagues, having an East to West, like having this inter-league playoff. I think the NBA is not the NCAA. Right. At first, I thought hey, would this create a March Madness type of feeling? Right. And I just don't think. I don't think that the NBA. I don't think that would work for the NBA, especially the history that the NBA has of the way it's done. I think that this is something new and different, right? You're going to have the eighth seed is going to have the ninth seed and the eighth seed are going to have a play-in tournament to see who gets the number 8 seed, right? That's something new. We haven't had that before. Normally, when the season finishes and you're the 9 seed, you're just the team that is not going to get a good pick, but was decent enough to be number 9. You really get nothing. You basically, you get nothing. You're just mediocre. Now, you at least have a chance to get into the postseason. I think the way they're going to do it is if you're the 8 seed, you only have to win 1 time, and if you're the 9 seed, you have to win 2. I don't know if all the details are out yet.
Stipulations about it. Yeah, it gets a little confusing, which I feel like it was just too many dudes in a room just trying to parse things up a little bit too much.
And as the weeks go on, we're going to get more and more information and more clarity about how it's going to be played out. I mean, listen, if they had said we're just going to mix up all 22 teams and we're just going to have a big tournament, I would still be excited because I would have watched. It would have been basketball, right? I would have been like, yeah, just give me anything. Right. But I think that this is a decent way. You have eight regular season games, give people a chance to kind of get their legs back under them, and then you kind of create a little bit of excitement. If you're a 9, and now you have something to play for. If you're an 11 seed or a 10 seed, it's a little weird in the Eastern Conference that they only have 9 teams, and then the Western Conference I think has 13 or 14 teams, something like that. But it's just so I think that's part of the other reason why they couldn't necessarily do this across the league thing, because it was a little unbalanced. There were too many teams in the Western Conference, not enough on the Eastern Conference. So I'm happy with it. I think I would have preferred just 8 and 8, 8 teams in the West and 8 teams in the East, and just go straight to the postseason. But I'll take this too. No complaints from me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the last teams that are vying for it, I mean, it really comes down to it's the Sixers, the Nets, the Magic, the Wizards in the East, and then you kind of have the Blazers, the Pelicans, the Kings, Spurs, and Suns kind of vying for some sort of spot in the West. And honestly, I really do think that, the NBA, like all sports, is a bottom line league. It's all about money, and I think that this is a way to get the New Orleans Pelicans. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I think that it's, Zion is a magnet, is a TV magnet. I mean, he's got like Shaq-like personality and charisma where people just, he's one of those few athletes that people will go out of their way to watch. And I think that this is a way to get him on TV. It'll draw. I'm going to watch for sure. I could care less about what the Kings do or the Suns do. And truthfully, the Memphis Grizzlies are interesting, but I hope that the Pelicans make it in the playoffs. I would love to see LeBron and the Lakers play Zion and the Pelicans in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm sure that there is something to it. I honestly, I just think, like Zion Williamson, to me, I'm actually more interested in seeing Ja Morant, the Memphis Grizzlies, because he's actually the rookie of the year to me. He's actually had a full season, whereas Zion was injured for like the first half of the year, and Zion's been great since he's come back. And I think, listen, anytime you have a chance to get your younger players, your future superstars into the postseason, it's great. And if we happen to get Zion in the postseason, that would be fantastic. I actually think the NBA was just trying to get some games. Listen, we get 8 games. It's 8 extra, chances for you to sell advertising, which you're going to probably have. I mean, there's probably going to be tremendous demand for people to be advertising on because there's nothing else going on. I mean, we saw baseball's basically their season's in jeopardy. I'm not sure exactly the specifics about what's happening with the NHL. I know they agreed to something, but I don't know exactly when they're going to start. Here we have the NBA with a solid July 31st start date. And so I just think the NBA is just moving forward, and they're going to try and do anything they can to make money, including giving a chance for the Pelicans or any other franchise for that matter to get into the postseason.
So speaking of, Zion's a superstar, but speaking of other superstars, do you think, and then do you think that it's a good idea that the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, because Kevin Durant is going to be, as of July 31st, it's going to be about 16 months since he tore his Achilles in the playoffs last year. And so, the Achilles injury is traditionally, it's 9 to 12 months. It seems like it's more towards the 12-month side. Mm-hmm. But even with that, even on the high end, Kevin Durant is still going to have an extra, quarter of a year to additionally to heal from that. So and the NBA, I think, actually made a statement today that they would allow injured players to come back, specifically, kind of in the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving sense. Do you think that Kevin Durant will come back? And then do you think that Kevin Durant should come back?
Well, I think on his Twitter feed or somewhere I saw that he said his season's over and he's not going to come back this year. So
he said a lot of things on Twitter that
there's always news coming out. I feel like I saw it scrolling on the bottom line of something somewhere today, and basically he said he's not coming back. And at first I was a little disappointed. I was like, I paid all this money, the Nets. I paid all this money, to bring a superstar in here. We're in the playoffs. We have a chance to make a run, and we have a difference-making player who's not willing to go out there and do anything and give us a good chance to win. That was my first reaction. But then I thought about it more, and I was like, it's probably the smart thing. He came out, what was it, last year at game 1 or game 2, whatever game it was, the NBA Finals, tried to give it a go against the Raptors, and he hurt himself again. And who knows, maybe that caused him to miss even more time than he would have. And so I think probably the smart thing to do is to just stick with their initial plan that next season is his first season with the Nets. You want him 100%. You want no chance of a re-injury or anything like that. If you're the Nets, it sucks because you have a chance to go far, especially in the East. If you had a healthy Kyrie Irving and a healthy Kevin Durant, I think the smart thing to do is just wait till next season.
I would love to see Kevin Durant come back because even when, for those few games that he was on the court in the playoffs last year, it was clear immediately that he was the best player on the court.
Yep.
And when he's on, he is as dangerous as anybody in the league. And if you combine him with a healthy Kyrie Irving, in the East for sure. But that duo would rival some of the best in the West too. And I think that the two of them, if they're healthy, there's nobody in the East that has a 1-2 punch like that. And so the Brooklyn Nets would go from sort of this dark horse kind of just throwaway team to a tried and true contender. I mean, I would love to see Giannis versus Kevin Durant on the court together. I mean, that's just.
And that was my initial instinct to want to, as the basketball fan, and he was like, "Yeah, just get out there and play."
But if I'm Kevin Durant, I think that you're right, and I think probably, and if it were me, having people kind of push me back, and doctors say I was ready when maybe I wasn't quite ready last year, and got injured. I mean, keep in mind it was a calf injury initially that then he rehabbed, and then they kind of threw him back out there, and then he tore his Achilles.
Yep.
And so had he not done that, maybe he never actually tears his Achilles, and maybe he's not out for an entire year. So I think having that sitting in the back of my mind would make me quite apprehensive, and I would probably say no too. I don't think it would be a great idea.
And also, who knows where his conditioning is right now as well? He's been rehabbing an injury. I don't know. Not to say I don't know what kind of shape he's in right now, but I'm sure it's not easy to be ready to play 48 or however many minutes in an NBA game. I'm sure that the amount of conditioning must be insane.
Well, and also too, don't forget though, but he's starting where everybody else is starting. I mean, it's not like he's picking up with, he's not jumping into traffic at 60 miles an hour. Everybody's at a dead stop.
That's a good point.
And going. So it would bode well for his re-entry in that everybody else is sort of coming off this long break too. But whatever. I mean, it remains to be seen. Hopefully he comes back, but I'm not expecting him to. But speaking of Kevin Durant, he appeared on a list let out by CBS Sports, and it was the all-time shooters list. Kevin Durant specifically was number 8 on their all-time shooters list. And this list, I think, is incredibly ambiguous by design. I think it's designed to create fodder, just like we're doing right now. And there's I take a little bit of an issue with it. And I don't know, I mean, I think have you had a chance to review the list?
Oh yeah, I had a chance to review the list, and I have some areas where I think I would have made some shifts, but definitely.
So going from last to first, just so everybody's on the same page here, it was the top 15 shooters, and it seems to me that there was a heavy emphasis on the 3-point shooter more so than just a jump shooter.
Absolutely.
From 15 to 1, the list goes as such. Dražen Petrovic was 15, Chris Mullin was 14, Mark Price was 13, Peja Stojakovic was 12, JJ Redick was actually number 11, Steve Kerr 10, Dirk Nowitzki number 9, Kevin Durant number 8, like we said, Steve Nash was number 7, Kyle Korver was number 6, which is right where I have a problem. Number 5 was Reggie Miller, 4 was Larry Bird, 3 was Ray Allen, 2 was Klay Thompson, and then number 1, I think, inarguably, was Steph Curry, which I think is absolutely right. But the two that stuck out were Kyle Korver and Klay Thompson. I take issue with.
Okay.
Klay Thompson is a great shooter. I don't want to take anything away from him, but I think there's a very sincere recency bias, and I think being Steph's teammate, it's almost like when you're out with your hot friend, it makes you look better sometimes. It's kind of, if this was the best shooting backcourt of all time, I think Steph and Klay, it's indisputably Steph and Klay number 1, and then probably the Pistons, Joe Dumars and Isaiah Thomas number 2 would be my vote. But in any event, I think Klay Thompson, he's had some amazing games, and he does have 3 rings. I'll give it to him. But I don't think the breadth of his career it's not close enough to being complete. Like, I've seen what Ray Allen has done. I've seen what Reggie Miller has done. I've seen what Larry Bird has done. And they all seem like they should be a little bit higher. I would put Klay definitely below Ray Allen and Larry Bird. Reggie Miller is kind of where I would be curious. That's where the debate starts for me, is between Klay Thompson and Reggie Miller. So
I'm going to say that I completely disagree with you. I think that Klay Thompson, before I even looked at the list, I said, okay, well, obviously Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are 1 and 2. I didn't even need to look at the list. And I'm looking at some numbers here, and here's the thing, right? I think as people get to listen to us and they'll know our tendencies, I tend to lean a lot on statistics,
Yep.
and numbers and analytics and things like that. And Klay Thompson, just, based on the numbers and the fact that he has done it in the postseason as well, like from a three-point percentage standpoint, better than all the players that you listed. His 42%, Ray Allen's 40%, Reggie Miller 39%. Klay Thompson is a phenomenal shooter, and I know you said that, but when you compare him against these other players like Reggie Miller, first of all, Klay Thompson's knocking down three three-pointers a game, 3.5 three-pointers a game, 3.4 three-pointers a game, like consistently over three-pointers per game throughout his career. Let's look at Reggie Miller. Never once was he at three. He hit 2.8 as his high mark. His career three-pointers made per game is 1.8 versus Klay Thompson at 2.9. He does it in the postseason as well. Now, if you're saying if I have one person to make a shot, then give it to I probably would pick Reggie Miller over Klay Thompson just because I've seen Reggie Miller knock down big shots, and I haven't seen Klay Thompson do it as much because he's not the first option on his team. And that's the only real knock against his positioning on here. You could say, hey, he's not the first option on the team, so if he was the focal point of the offense and thus the focal point of opposing defenses, would he be as good? That has yet to be seen. But he is taking like 8 3-pointers. Like he averages for a career 7 3-pointers attempts per game. 7 3-point attempts per game. For Reggie Miller's career is 4.7.
Yep.
He's making it rain out there. He's knocking down a lot of shots. I love Klay Thompson as the number 2, and I don't really think it's really close. It's Steph Curry 1, Klay Thompson 2.
See, I think we put different onus on different things in this list, and maybe again that's probably the idea of the list. But to me, it is who do I want to make one shot, but I think there has to be something factored into not only being able to create your own shot, but being able to create and make your own shot under pressure. And that's not to say that Klay hasn't done it, but Ray Allen, Larry Bird, Reggie Miller, I've seen them win games and take over games in the playoffs. There's Reggie Miller.
We've seen Klay do that too. Maybe not the game-winning shots, but he's taken over games and hit lots of three-point shots in games.
Yes, regular season games
and postseason games. He's had great postseason games.
Well, so Reggie hit a game. He had a game winner against the 76ers. He won. It was a walk-off in the 2001 playoffs. I've seen him score 9 points, 8 points in 9 seconds against the Knicks in game 1 of the 95 playoffs. And it's just, I feel like when you're hitting these big shots matters almost as much as how well you shoot them when you have them, which leads me to my problem with Kyle Korver. Can you name one highlight from Kyle Korver? Can you name one big shot Kyle Korver's ever hit in his life? No.
I completely agree with you with Kyle Korver. I completely agree. I have no argument for Kyle Korver.
Kyle Korver is he is a great 3-point shooter. He is. He's been on some very good teams. He is he's almost a 43% 3-point shooter. So he is good. But again, he doesn't stand alone in the same way that Larry. Think of Larry Bird and think of Kyle Korver. Larry Bird people were going out of their way to stop Larry Bird at all costs, and he's still in an era of physicality that's beyond anything anybody's seen. Managed 24 points a game and was still a 38% 3-point shooter. And so Kyle Korver, by and large, the last real impact he had was when he was with LeBron. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, all right, LeBron, you take triple teamed, and then I'll stand over here and just wait, and then you kick it out to me, and then I make the 3-point shot. He's sort of a compiler in that way, and I think you have Steve Kerr all the way at number 10, and Kyle Korver's at 6. Steve Kerr's the same kind of way. Steve Kerr's a great 3-point shooter. He's phenomenal, but again, it's the pressure of the shot and then being able to create your own shot are things that matter to me significantly.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle Korver. I think it's a bit high. But I will say this: if you're saying, how can you say that someone's a better 3-point? Like if my career 3-point shooting average is 42% and someone else is 39 or 38, how can I then say that they're a better 3-point shooter than I am? Now, from a volume standpoint, I think, Kyle Korver, I think you're right. Like I'm sure there's a lot of pressure though when someone gets open, like, hey, I'm going to drive to the basket, I'm going to draw a triple T, and I'm going to kick it out to you. You better make this 3-pointer, right? Like,
yes,
so
but
that's all you can do.
Is hit a 3-pointer. When there's no one in your face, it's much easier to hit. I mean, there's pressure, but there's not nearly as much pressure as having a forearm in your back when you're doing it. I mean, it's
talking about a guy who knocked down 53% of his 3-pointers one season. Like, he definitely belongs on the list. I think that's why I didn't have a problem with Klay Thompson, because his volume is there, right? He's shooting a lot of shots. It's not like, there's very few games where Klay Thompson has 4 shots. You know what I'm saying? Like, Kyle Korver could have plenty of games where he only has 3 or 4 shots because he's just spotting up for 3-pointers. So I had no issue with Kyle. I mean, I had no issue with Klay Thompson. I would have dropped Kyle Korver into like the bottom spots and probably moved up people like Mark Price or Peja Stojakovic, who I think were guys who were a little bit more primary options on their team as far as scoring. One guy that and I don't want to be disrespectful or anything like that, but I didn't agree with Drazen Petrovic being on the list. I know that his career was cut short through a tragic accident. I know that people consider him a great shooter, but once again, I'm just looking at the numbers, and he was great, but give me Glenn Rice, who didn't make this list at all, over Drazen Petrovic. Like, it's not close to me. Just, and so I think there's a lot of guys who probably should have taken that Drazen Petrovic spot. But, I guess, this is the case where I didn't really actually watch Drazen Petrovic play when I was an astute basketball fan. I was aware of him when I was younger, but, his career was over in 1992, and I think I was 12 years old, or 11 years old. So I just wasn't really watching. So that was the guy who I had the biggest problem with. It's like I didn't think he belonged on the list.
I think, Kyle Korver at 6 is too high, and I would have dropped him specifically for the next 3 guys. I would have put him below the next 3 guys in that list. So Kyle Korver is 6, Steve Nash is 7, Kevin Durant is 8, and Dirk is 9. Steve Nash, I mean, if it's a shooter's list, I mean, Steve Nash has a career 90% free throw, 50% from the floor, and 40% 3-point, and he did that for 3 seasons.
He's ridiculous.
That's a 2-time MVP. I mean, Steve Nash is at the best shooter, one of the best shooters from anywhere on the court, not just from 3.
Now, remember, though, just for your argument, he never did it in the championship game. He never did it in the finals, and
but he did do it for a career.
He did do it for a career, but, I'm just, you were talking about Klay Thompson wanting, your criticism with him was like, would he knock down the big shot? Like, I don't remember Steve Nash knocking down a ton of big-time 3-pointers, certainly not bigger than Klay Thompson has.
Yeah, well, then you can move on to, I would still put him below Kevin Durant and Dirk Nowitzki because,
absolutely.
Like we're saying, Kevin Durant has gone toe-to-toe with LeBron in the finals and made him look silly. And to make LeBron look bad is not an easy task at all. And then Dirk Nowitzki, the same thing. Dirk, that Mavericks team took down what was supposed to be, the second coming of the Chicago Bulls with the Heat and the Heatles, as some people like to call them, which drives me crazy. But that Mavericks
Dirk was the guy who I thought maybe was a little low. Dirk was the guy I thought maybe could have been higher.
Steve Nash, Kevin Durant, and Dirk should have all been higher, and I think Kyle Korver should have been lower. But, Klay Thompson, we can agree to disagree. He's still, and I will say, before his career's over, I might come around on this and say, okay, he does belong as the number 2. I think maybe Steph is sort of, he's taking away a little bit, sort of cannibalizing some of my thought of Klay Thompson.
The best thing that could happen to Klay Thompson is that he goes and signs someplace else and becomes the number 1 guy someplace. Of course, he's signed a big contract extension, I believe, with the Golden State Warriors last season, so that's not going to happen. But that would be the best thing to happen to him.
I think, this I hope that this gets revisited some years from now. And JJ Redick does have a beautiful shot. I didn't realize how good he was, but he's got a very nice. Yeah, he should be on there. I'm not sure if he's where he should be, but Glenn Rice for sure. And Robert Horry, I know Robert Horry has like a career 6 points a game, but you talk about him, his nickname is Big Shot Bob. So how do he has 7 titles. I mean, how do you not put him on the all-time shooters list? But I guess it's swayed too far in the other direction where he doesn't have enough points to really amassed. He hasn't amassed enough points to justify being on the list. But in any event, we should come up with our own shooters list, I think, and maybe make some more specific
I thought
guidelines.
Michael Jordan could have been on the list, but it just based on his 2-point shooting, and being the 3-point wasn't a part of his game.
Yeah.
He's a great shooter, but I does think this does seem like this was heavily slanted towards 3-point shooters.
Some quick NBA trivia with Michael Jordan. His third year, he averaged 37.3 points a game, I think, and his highest single season average, pretty much outside of Will Chamberlain. Do you know, just to put everything in perspective, so Steph and his MVP year made over 400 3-pointers that season. Do you know, in the year that Michael Jordan averaged his highest point average, how many 3-pointers he made in that season?
I think you've told me, wasn't it like 3?
It's 12.
12, okay. I remember it was a really low number. Yeah. Okay.
12 3-pointers in that entire season. So think about how many 2-pointers you have to make and how many free throws you have to make to average 37 points a game. It's just it's mind-blowing. So I think you're right. I think Jordan does belong on this list on some level, but as far as shooting, I mean, maybe driving to the hole, they don't count as shooting, so I don't know.
His mid-range jumper was ridiculous too, but it's besides the point.
Either way, it's an interesting list to say the least, but we're going to take a break. And coming up next, we're going to round out the show. We're going to break down the NFC South. We're going to go in order from first to worst and see where we agree and disagree. Come find us on Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We are on the iHeartRadio podcasting lineup and pretty much everywhere you can find podcasts. So stick around. We're going to come right back on the Benchwarmers podcast.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Now available on iHeartRadio and Spotify. This is the Benchwarmers Podcast. Here's Lou and Jose.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and you are listening to the Benchwarmers Podcast. We are rounding out our number 2 in this week 9. We've gone over quite a bit. You can find hour 1 either on iHeartRadio, on Spotify, on YouTube. We're on Instagram, Facebook. You can email us, the Benchwarmers Podcast at yahoo.com with any comments, questions, etc., etc. Benchwarmers with a Z. Earlier, we talked NBA. NBA is coming back. It's the all-time shooters list. And now, finally, Jose, I want to kind of circle back to the NFL because, I mean, let's face it, sports revolves around the NFL at all times. And I want to rank the NFC South from first to worst. No numbers, but I do want to see who is your first, second, third, and fourth picks. I have a feeling this is going to be somewhat similar. Just to recap, last season, the Saints won the division at 13-3. The Falcons were technically second place at 7-9. The Buccaneers also had a 7-9 record, but were third. And then the Panthers were at a very lowly 5-11. And this season, I mean, I think, first off, I think that the Saints repeat just because they're the Saints. I mean, from top to bottom, coaching, I mean, you take any factor you need, and I don't see how the Saints, I mean, I don't know if they're going to beat 13-3 again, but I can see them getting pretty close. I mean, they lost Teddy Bridgewater and they lost Ted Ginn, which, okay. Eli Apple, they lost. But they did add Malcolm Jenkins as a safety from the Eagles, and they signed Emmanuel Sanders, who, was an incredible addition for the 49ers last year, who, by the way, went to the Super Bowl. And, aside from Michael Thomas, I mean, Drew Brees that team has been desperate for a legitimate number 2 receiver. And I think Emmanuel Sanders is exactly what they needed and rounds out that offense almost perfectly.
Yeah, I can't agree with you anymore. Saints all the way. I literally was like searching for something to not like about the Saints. I was like, I gotta find something bad to say about them. But like, you're returning 10 Pro Bowlers to a team that won 13 games last year. You got Breeze, you got Kamara, you got Thomas, you got Cook, you got Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore. They are loaded in a winnable division. Easily, I don't think easily winnable, but it should be a pretty. It shouldn't be the most competitive division. I don't think you already talked about who they added. Also added Janoris Jenkins.
Right.
It's. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it because
Yeah.
they're Super Bowl. They're going to be Super Bowl contenders, among the top of the Super Bowl contenders to start this season without a doubt. To me, I just don't see any way they win fewer than 12 games this year.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of going chalk at this point.
Yep.
In second place, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they signed a.
Who did they sign?
I was a quarterback, I think.
I can't remember his name.
Was it Teddy Bridgewater? Is that TB? No, it was the other TB. Oh, right. It was the greatest quarterback of all time, 42-year-old Tom Brady, and they also tacked on Rob Gronkowski for good measure. And I mean, there's not a lot that needs to be said. I mean, every media outlet on earth has been covering the Bucs nonstop, more in the last 3 months than they have in the last 3 decades. So, I mean, I think with the notable losses are just obviously Jameis Winston, Peyton Barber. I mean, there's nobody really that is excitingly notable, but they do, and their defense, headlined by Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul, I think is sort of flying under the radar a little bit, and they were a pretty stout defense last year.
Yeah, they were a top 5 defense last season, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think their litany of offensive weapons combined with Bruce Arians' sort of sling it mentality. You have, Bruce Arians kind of saying, go for it. And Tom Brady has enough sense where, he's check down Charlie half the time. If he doesn't have it, he just throws it away. He's smart enough not to take too much risk if he doesn't need to. You live to fight another play, basically. And so between OJ Howard, Rob Gronkowski, and Cameron Brate, that tree, just stop there. You don't even have to talk about the receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Just that lineup alone is enough to put them, I think, easily in second place in this division.
Yeah, so I was going back and forth between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Falcons for second and third place, as I think is everyone's probably doing that. And to me, I decided to go with Atlanta at second place, and it came down to continuity. Dan Quinn, head coach Dan Quinn's on the hot seat. There's pressure for the Falcons to kind of get back to winning after having two losing seasons in a row. Matt Ryan getting paid through the nose. They won only 7 games last year. They added Todd Gurley, who should be an upgrade over Devonta Freeman. And they should have a potentially elite offense with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley at the wide receiver position. They don't have a great defense. I think it should be decent. I think they're going to kind of be like, I could see both the Falcons and the Buccaneers winning around 9 to 10 games this year. For me, just to quickly talk about Tampa Bay, I think they're great. There's really not a lot to dislike. I worry about them gelling together in this first year with everything that's going on with the pandemic and just you're adding a whole new quarterback in there. It's a really important position to be switching and to not have OTAs and all the full training camp and all the different things that a new quarterback would be taking advantage of, I think is going to be a detriment to the Buccaneers. I think they're still going to be a good team. I think they're still going to compete for a postseason spot just because I want to say earlier when we were recording, a few weeks ago, I said that the Buccaneers are probably not going to make the playoffs. I think I would like to amend that, and we'll see how it goes. I think they will be a playoff team. I have the Falcons edging them just a little bit, and I could see 3 postseason, especially with 7 playoff teams coming out of each conference this year. I could see the NFC South having 2 or 3 playoff teams. So basically everything you said about Tampa Bay is great. They also added to their offensive line, which was a big weakness last year. Drafted Tristan Wirfs in the first round. I'm expecting them to be a great team. I just think it might be a little slow out of the gate for them, and that might be the difference in winning 10 or 8 games.
Yeah, I have the Falcons at 3, and a lot of it is just sort of, it feels like they're just kind of treading water because I think it's been pretty clear that Kyle Shanahan was the engine that drove that team to their success, not Dan Quinn. And he's not there. He's still not there. And they lost Austin Hooper, who was a tremendous tight end last year.
Yeah.
And they traded out Devontae Freeman, an injury-prone running back, for Todd Gurley, who, he's also an injury-prone running back. So I feel like that's sort of a push. I mean, the ceiling for Todd Gurley is obviously higher, but we haven't seen his ceiling in 3 years. I mean, he's such a wild card. They lost Desmond Trufant, the cornerback on defense. They lost Vic Beasley, who again has been a quietly good linebacker. I can't put my finger on it because they do have a great wide receiver duo. Julio Jones could be the best wide receiver in the league. Calvin Ridley's amazing. He's certainly on the uptick, but I don't know. It feels like, you talk about continuity with the Buccaneers. I think that the Falcons just seem like they've lost their identity somehow. And it feels like they've just been slipping and slipping and slipping. And I don't see a good reason why how they're going to pull themselves out of it. But so that leaves us with an agreement for fourth place in the Carolina Panthers. And I feel like the Panthers I don't think that they're as bad as, their 5-11 record may have led them was last year. And the addition, of Teddy Bridgewater, of course, is an upgrade. But, I feel like they have some bad luck. They're in a really tough division, and I don't think that they're going to be able to do much about it, even with arguably the best running back in the league in Christian McCaffrey.
I think they are that bad, and I think they'll be lucky to win 5 games this year. I think they're going to be in the running for a number 1 overall pick next season. Certainly a top 5 pick. I just don't see any way they won't be one of the worst 5 teams in the NFL next season. You have Christian McCaffrey. Like, I don't remember what the Vikings record was when Teddy Bridgewater was their starter. I'm not a big Teddy Bridgewater guy. If you can't get the ball down the field, I just don't see that working. They have a good, nice young core. We talked about before how they drafted 7 defensive players, so a few of them have to be good. I just think 2-3 games they end up winning this year. I don't see them being very competitive at all.
That's real bad.
And also, they lost. Let's not forget, Luke Kuechly retired too. So the defense is going to take a huge step back. There's not a lot to be excited about, other than a few nice pieces here and there.
Yeah, I mean, they lost Luke Kuechly. They lost Cam Newton, obviously.
Yeah.
They lost Greg Olsen. Don't forget.
Yeah,
there was a lot in there, and I don't think that it's going to be a very good season in any respect for the Carolina Panthers, sadly. But maybe next year. All right, so Jose, that'll do it. We are out of time for this week. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, and again, with no sports, I'm excited for when we actually have sports back, because we've been talking a lot about sports with no sports.
I'm actually worried for when that happens, because I'm like, we have to learn to shut up a couple times now because we have so much to get in.
Yep.
So we're going to have to really control ourselves.
Yeah. Feel free to tell us to shut up.
No more long tangents.
Feel free to tell us to shut up at the Benchwarmers podcast at yahoo.com. Benchwarmers with a Z. You can follow us along on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, all at the Benchwarmers podcast. Find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. We are, again, proudly part of the iHeartRadio podcasting lineup, and hopefully we're going to come back next week and try to make it even a little better. So for Jose Ortiz, I am Lou Ruggieri. This has been the Benchwarmers podcast, and see you next time. Bye-bye.